Qui-Gon Jinn was one of the most rebellious Jedi in the entire Order, and not just because he ordered Obi-Wan Kenobi to train Anakin Skywalker against the Council's wishes. The galaxy's residents often considered the Knight of Order as particularly cold, pragmatic peacekeepers. But Qui-Gon was different. He treated everyone he encountered with a special warmth, with compassion instead of detachment. So it's quite shocking to discover the graceful Jedi Master was responsible for mercilessly butchering an entire tribe of tiny sentient creatures known as Mogonites on the Outer Rim world of Aurora. Why did Qui-Gon massacre them all, and did Obi-Wan Kenobi try to stop his master? Join us as we discover the truth behind this tale in today's underrated moment. Taking Obi-Wan Kenobi to the Sitar sector seemed like an odd choice at first, even for Qui-Gon Jinn, who had taken an unusual liking to backwater planets. The space around Aurora was like walking into another time before the civilized advances of the Republic. And perhaps that's why the Jedi Master liked it so much. Obi-Wan wasn't a young boy anymore. Jinn was painfully aware that all the years he had spent teaching the mysteries of the Force to his young apprentice had seemed to go by in the blink of an eye. Try as he might to stay within each and every moment with his Padawan, even his powerful abilities to slow his perception of time wasn't enough. The future was coming, quickly, and Jinn couldn't foresee the challenges Kenobi would face. But Qui-Gon knew that it was his job to prepare the boy for absolutely everything he might encounter, and that's what he was here to do. As Jinn tried to quiet his thoughts, Obi-Wan Kenobi climbed into the canopy of a massive wart-covered tree. Its curled brown limbs stretched into the air horizontally, making the perfect little ledge for the young Padawan to enjoy the views of the forest-covered mountains. In the distance, a flock of pink-hued Beldons floated eastward on fair winds. But Kenobi was distracted by a curious creature that snuggled up from right beneath him. Covered in a mane of thick green fur, the alien's cute golden eyes served as invitation for the Jedi to drop his guard. Charmed by the beast's cute face, Obi-Wan reached out his hand. "What kind of thing are you, little guy? Don't worry, I won't hurt you," he said, curling his fingers as if he was beckoning one of the street hounds that ate scraps in the alleys around the Temple of Coruscant. Realizing that he'd lured his prey into letting his guard down, the small golden face erupted through the leaves of the canopy and revealed the body of a giant tree serpent. With a razor-sharp mandible and thick armored scales, Obi-Wan knew he couldn't simply swing his blue lightsaber around and hope to win the battle. And even if he could, he'd need to actually have one of the fabled Jedi blades first. And as far as he knew, his was still back at the hut. With a sudden lunge, the monster tried to catch a hold of Kenobi and eat the Jedi in a single bite. But with the power of the Force, Kenobi propelled himself up to a slender limb higher up the tree. The serpent coiled again, hoping to get a second chance at his newly found breakfast. But when it leapt forward, instead of sinking its teeth into the slender flesh of a top talent within the Jedi Order, its mandibles met the hardened wood of the Aurora tree. As its mouth erupted into a foaming river of saliva and blood, Obi-Wan dropped from the tree and used the Force to cushion his fall onto the forest floor below. "Master Qui-Gon," Obi-Wan shouted, as his brown cloak flew through the air. Kenobi was in an all-out sprint and used the Force to push him to speeds far greater than any native creature on the planet. "Your lightsaber! A monster!" Kenobi continued. But when he finally saw his monster, Obi-Wan was shocked to find Qui-Gon wasn't panicked at all, and was instead entirely unbothered by the appearance of the monster. Jinn quickly explained that Obi-Wan had done enough to defeat the beast and that its own broken mandible would all but guarantee that it would no longer be able to hunt, which meant it would die. The fate of beings in the galaxy, their lives and deaths, was a constant subject that Jinn liked to talk about. The presence of the Force in all creatures confused Obi-Wan and most Jedi. They couldn't quite figure out the distinction between a Jedi's role as a hero, when they would ignite their multicolored blades and defend the lives of the innocent, and the role as executioner, when they would use those same weapons to end lives. Jinn would have used Kenobi's recent ordeal to illustrate the mysteries of the Force. But he was busy. On his back, a small purple-hued creature was clinging to his hair. With two large purple ears and gold piercings throughout his face, the tiny native of Aurora looked very much like an Outer Rim version of a Grand Master Yoda from the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. But this was as far as their similarities would go. "This is Mosco Bolpa," Qui-Gon explained as he held his hand up to point at the creature on his shoulders. "He's a Mogonite, I found him in a Blagware snare. If I hadn't cut him free and gotten him out of there, he would have been at their table tonight. After Jinn's introduction, Kenobi couldn't help but be further confused. Jinn always preached that the will of the Force guided his actions, but it seemed that there was a certain level of inconsistency between Qui-Gonn's rules in this latest action. But Obi-Wan was too distracted with their new companion's manners, or rather lack of them, to dwell on the murky topic of life and death. "Mosco not need help. Mosco honor you with his company," the small Mogonite barked, as he shook his small staff in the air, urging Qui-Gon to march further as if the master was a mindless dewback beneath a sand trooper on Tatooine. And when the three arrived back at their small makeshift hut beneath the roots of a giant Aurora tree, the Mogonite's sharp tongue cut deeper. "Now you have honor to feed, Mosco," the creature said, as his two yellow eyes looked up at the rope sack of slightly over-ripened milu runs that hung on the ceiling. "You can be proud to say Mosco eat my filthy food." The final comment was the last straw. Obi-Wan Kenobi was patient when compared to the other apprentices in the Jedi Order, but this Mogonite was testing even his relatively long fuse. When Kenobi turned to his master and demanded to know why they were helping the little goblin in the first place, Jinn tried yet again to explain his experience as a lesson in the Force. "He is giving us an opportunity to serve the living Force without the remotest chance of reward," Qui-Gon told his young Padawan. "Saving a being's life while they hurled nonstop insults at you was certainly a thankless affair." But Kenobi wouldn't buy it. He had seen enough of this Mogonite to know it would cut their throat while they slept and take off with their shuttle if he could. After rifling through the bag of fruit one more time and selecting the largest one for himself, the tiny creature walked out through the front door, but not without first confirming a question that was on his mind. "Only you two here?" Mosco asked with the pointed finger. As Jinn stared back at his new companion, he could almost see the scheme Mosco was cooking up through his tiny yellow eyes. But instead of trying to prevent whatever plan the monster was plotting, Jinn simply nodded and confirmed that he and Obi-Wan were in fact the only two residents in the rustic wooden hut. That night, when the world's single sun fell, Obi-Wan struggled to find sleep. The day's events, from the massive monster in the jungle to the threatening tiny Mogonite, troubled him. It wasn't until the early morning, when the surface of the world had reached its absolute lowest temperature, that the Padawan finally shut his eyes. Outside, Mosco and his friends were waiting. Once they heard Kenobi's heavy breathing join his master's, they realized he had fallen asleep, and they took their shot. With fire-lit torches in hand, Mosco and his tribes descended on the two slumbering Jedi. Riding razor-toothed bipeds as their steeds, the Mogonites' raiding party was surprisingly deadly, despite their short stature. Qui-Gon was the first to wake, and he barely opened his eyes in time to see the thin wooden wall of their hut shatter beneath the weight of the stampeding raiders. The Jedi Master barked at his Padawan to arm himself while he retrieved his own green lightsaber and quickly ignited the blade. As Mosco and his crew fit arrows to their bows and launched a volley at Obi-Wan, the young Padawan drew his snub-nosed blaster to match them. Together, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fought the raiders until the day broke, leaving behind a mound of Mogonites' corpses on the floor of their now destroyed forest home. When the adrenaline finally dissipated and Kenobi had a few moments to gather himself, he discovered that he was yet again confused by the entire series of events. Mosco would have never attacked them if Qui-Gon hadn't saved the goblin from the hunter's trap. And later, when the little thief made the vaguely threatening comment, "Only you two here, right?" Jinn let him go, instead of preventing him from gathering his other Mogonite friends to start a raid. Obi-Wan felt like Qui-Gon was picking and choosing when to interfere with the affairs of others and when to refrain. After the pair had gathered what was left of their supplies and charted their course through the forest, Kenobi finally decided to ask his master directly, and the response was not what Kenobi had expected. "My actions are determined by the will of the living Force. I fed that poor little brute because he was hungry," Jinn said, as he waded through a thicket of ferns that brushed his chest. "I kill him because if I had let him kill me, I would no longer be able to do my work as a Jedi. When the Force tells me the time has come for me to die, Obi-Wan, I will die willingly." Kenobi wished he could be as in tune with the Force as his master. How could he ever know when the Force was commanding him to do something and when it was just his own desire? Perhaps, in truth, his master Qui-Gon was equally confused about the nature of the living Force, and in secret, during their trek to the other side of the planet, Obi-Wan let these doubts fester in his mind.